Now to an exclusive on The Beat tonight. The man who some say was Trump's Michael Cohen before Michael Cohen is here to talk to us. He might put it differently, but Jay Goldberg did predict on The Beat that Cohen was likely to flip over the legal fees and pressure he faced. He decided Michael Cohen as someone who was always talking about even stories and links to the mob. This was as Trump world is possibly turning on all the investigators into Trump world. Longtime Trump CFO Allen Weisselberg, well, he's cut a deal of sorts in the Cohen case. David Pecker, the head of the National Enquirer, has now left the Canadian media company all over the scrutiny on him for what he did with Cohen to pay off multiple women. 3 Trump world associates apparently turning on their boss and their once loyal friend. Joining me now, as I mentioned, is Jay Goldberg. He was Donald Trump's exclusive litigator for 15 years. He also has a new book coming out this winter. The Courtroom is My Theater, my lifelong representation of famous politicians, industrialists, entertainers, men of honor, and more. And another seasoned attorney, Maya Wiley, also at the table. Jay, let's take a look at your prediction, which has proven correct in part, that Cohen would buckle under the pressure. And you also talked about other crimes he might be affiliated with. Take a look. We hear a lot now about potential money laundering and the mafia. Why do you think that comes up with Michael Cohen?
Well, people involved in the building trades are at the mercy of the mob.
Do you think Michael Cohen's job at times was to keep the mob away from Donald Trump?
And the question is, what did he fix? And what needed fixing? What needed fixing was relations with the mob.
How did you get it right that he would plea? And if you were right about relations with the mob, why was that not charged?
Well, I said on another program that I couldn't see him after he got his inmate clothing and was told to walk down Broadway, that there would be inmates banging their phone cups against the bars, saying to him, "You're going to be my wife." And I didn't think he would have the stomach to risk what really goes on in a prison setting.
Do you think he won't get a real sentence?
He will get a real sentence only after he provides substantial assistance.
Why no mob charges?
Why? What was that?
Why no charges related to the mob?
Well, that could be a long-standing investigation conducted by the Southern District. They have in the past looked into the building trades and seen that builders in New York are at the mercy of mobsters who threaten labor strife in order to unduly burden a builder. And a payoff is the order of the day.
Now, you like Donald Trump.
I liked him, and I still like him a great deal.
Let me read to you some of his language. You talk about the mob.
Yes.
He said John McGahn, quote, isn't a John Dean style rat, Don McGahn. He said he knows all about, quote, flippers. He praised Manafort because he wouldn't, quote, break. And he talks a lot about loyalty. Does that remind you of some of the accused mafiosos that you've ever represented?
Yes, that's typical language. I mean,
is that the right language for the president?
I wouldn't, there's no precedent that I could turn to say whether it's right or wrong. It's correct as far as I can tell. And to hinge a interview on a word that he used as opposed to another word, I think is
that
waste of time.
Yeah, you think that's not the focus. I'm going to come back to you. Let me bring in Maya for any response.
Well, first, I would say we actually don't know whether Michael Cohen is getting any kind of a break. What he has done is shifted his plea, but what and whether there's a cooperation agreement and what he's getting in exchange for it, we don't know. I absolutely agree with Mr. Goldberg that the question is whether he has something to offer. And the question about what he has to offer related to business dealings that interact with Russians is something that there's been a lot of news reporting about, a long history of Michael Cohen having relationships with people who appear to be mob connected. So that is something we don't know, but is something that I would expect prosecutors to be interested in. Could still be looking at and not necessarily there yet.
Now, Jay, as you know, this story has captivated the entire nation. I'm sure you hear from people as you have taken a public role. I don't know if you're familiar with Curtis Jackson, the musician 50 Cent. Have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
He's a pretty prominent musician, and when we were covering this, he spoke about this, and he agreed with you that the nature of Michael Cohen, that who he is, would lead to him cutting a deal. Take a look.
Yes.
He gonna snap. He gonna tell all of it. Harvey, he like Trump. Michael like Trump, but he don't like him enough to go through that time for him. He ain't from the neighborhood.
I wonder if you could contrast that analysis with overlaps with yours about the type of person Mr. Cohen is, and the reports that Mr. Manafort also entered some discussions of a plea, whether or not it involved cooperating information.
I think anybody facing a long prison term caves in. I can only think of two people, Carmine the Snake Persico and Fat Tony Salerno, as the two people who stood up and said, 80 years, I'll do it. And other than that, people, mafiosa or others, faced with a long prison term, quote, cooperate. But you must remember this, Harry. The fact that they're cooperating doesn't ensure that they're telling the truth. Their role is to win the cooperation of the government so that the government tells the judge they have provided substantial assistance, and the judge can go outside the guidelines and give them a more lenient sentence.
What do you think of Mr. Stone, Roger Stone, who has sworn up and down he would never cooperate? Would you think of him as as you put it, a snake-level resistor?
Well, I know him because he was...
Jay, you know everybody.
Well, that's true. That's true. And David Pecker as well. But the point is, Roger Stone is a well-heeled, creative guy who, if there's a way to put something favoring your client, he thinks of it. He's a very crafty individual. So he's unique. And I can't say where he would come out. But as I said before, nobody looks at the prison walls and says he can do the time, except for the two people I've mentioned.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.